You're listening to the Meet the Farmers podcast with me, your host, Ben Eagle. Please remember to subscribe to the show wherever you are listening. Episode 268 of the Meet the Farmers podcast with me, Ben Eagle. Now, you were going to hear from Michael Bulls today. Michael is the farm manager of the Crown Point Estate in Norfolk, and I promise that episode will come out in the next few weeks. But with last week's events in Parliament in mind, i.e. the budget, I thought it was right to reflect on that, especially given the extent to which farmers were impacted and the reaction that there has been by farmers on social media, by the farming press and farming organisations. And quite understandably, a lot of farmers were in downright shock, I suppose, and lots of anger after arguably the most impactful budget for farmers in history. But let's take a look at what was said and what it could mean for farming. Because yes, APR, Agricultural Property Relief, and Business Property Relief were high on the headlines, and they're certainly dominating the conversations that are being had by many farmers. But there was a lot else out there, and I've heard a few farmers talking about this extra info, but I thought it would be good to just reflect on everything really as a whole. So first of all, let's focus on the DEFRA budget. And this, I suppose, is a slim positive, depending on your viewpoint. The DEFRA budget sits at 2.4 billion. So the ELM schemes can continue, although in real terms, this could be seen as a cut due to inflation. And certainly the NFU and others had been hoping for a much higher budget in order to tackle the myriad of issues that farmers are being asked to tackle overall. And of this 2.4 billion, 1.8 billion will be spent on environmental land management schemes, with the remainder on productivity schemes and final de-linked payments. So that's the overhang from BPS, Basic Payment Scheme. The fund also includes an additional 10 million on top of the previously announced 50 million allocation under the Farming Recovery Fund. 400 million in capital funding has been made available for tree planting and peatland restoration. There's also been a small increase in funding to support flood defences and farm flood schemes. So if you're interested in any of those, look into that. However, for next year, it should also be clear that there is a plan for accelerated cuts to, again, that overhang from BPS, hangover from the cap, which will affect larger landowners, I suppose probably to the biggest extent, but just look into that and see how you'll be impacted as well. Now let's turn to the main event, Agricultural Property Relief and Business Property Relief. So the government has announced that it will reform inheritance tax reliefs from the 6th of April 2026. So farms will continue to get relief for the first £1 million of combined agricultural and business property, and after that the rate of relief will be 50%, with assets thereafter taxed at an effective rate of 20%. So in essence this means 20% on all assets over £1 million. And I'm not going to get into the politics of what that involves, but clearly the number of farms impacted is going to be way more than the government has alluded to. One small positive, I suppose, that's being talked about is that APR will be extended to land managed under an environmental agreement from 6th of April 2025, something that hasn't been the case before now. And I know that in particular the CLA and others have been lobbying for that. So that's something to raise. Now, this action as a whole could have an extreme impact really on the makeup of who owns what in future, as the tax bill for future generations could mean large-scale sales of land or new generations having to borrow large amounts of cash from the banks and in effect rent their farmland back gradually. It could also have massive impact on tenants, as tenanted land is likely to be up for grabs when it comes to working out how to pay the tax bill. Really interesting times. And I sat in on the Farmers Guardian webinar last week. I don't know whether any of you did too. And this was in particular something that was raised, that definitely this is as much a budget that impacts tenants as well as landlords. And often these are tenants of a landlord who may be renting farmland to 1, 2, maybe 3 tenants. So this could be a really personal thing. And that was something that was raised during that webinar, which I certainly took on board. I should say at this point that if anyone is struggling with your mental health, please talk to someone. No matter how bad the situation might seem, there is always a way through it. Agriculture has a number of different organisations behind it, such as the Farming Community Network and the DPJ Foundation, among others. There's lots of people there who you can contact and speak to. If you need to talk, they are there for you. Employers among you have also been hit by the budget. Employers' national insurance contributions will increase by 1.2% from 13.8% to 15%. The Chancellor also announced that the secondary threshold, which is the point when employers start paying national insurance, will be cut from £9,100 to £5,000 a year. However, the present employment allowance of £100,000 eligibility threshold will be removed, expanding that allowance to almost all employers, it's being said. At the same time, the employment allowance has been increased from £5,000 to £10,500 per employee. Something else that happened, which will hit those who think of the long term, i.e. farmers, is that the lower rate of capital gains tax has increased from 10% to 18% with immediate effect. So that's already the case now. And the higher rate has been raised from 20% to 24%. However, the rates of capital gains tax on residential property will remain at 18% and 24%. This is really going to hit farmers, especially those who have to sell off assets to keep afloat due to the rises in APR. So yet again, the Chancellor has hit farmers there. Business asset disposal relief. This is an interesting one. That's remaining in place. You'll be pleased to know, at least. This is a relief that, in essence, many business owners use to sell assets to retain funds for retirement. However, the rate will rise to 14% from the 6th of April 2025 and will match the main lower rate, 18%, from the 6th of April 2026. And there's been a rise in the national living wage and a minimum wage, which will also hit employers. From April 2025, the national living wage will increase from £11.44 per hour to £12.21 per hour, representing an increase of 6.7%, and that applies to those 21 and over. At the same time, the national minimum wage that applies to those aged between 18 and 20 will go up from £8.60 to £10 per hour. And the apprentice rate, that's also increasing from £6.40 per hour to £7.55 per hour. And the rate for 16 and 17-year-olds, that we don't know yet. That's yet to be set. Fuel duty wise, there's been a freeze, so there's something to be welcomed by farmers. And the government has also extended the temporary 5p cut for 1 year. But let's be honest, it is a very small consolation given everything else that's going on. It was announced that there will be £46 million put forward to support the recruitment and training of an additional 300 planning officers, which might help a little bit to ease the pressure. But as farmers will know, rural businesses will know quite how much impact planning has on projects and on getting business moving in the countryside. I'll let you decide whether that will make an impact or not. And also, good news there in terms of there's an additional 1.7 billion allocation for infrastructure spend on schools, health and transport. So there's some indirect spending going on there. But again, I'm rather clutching at straws here. for good news for farmers. So that's it, a quite unbelievable budget. And I would love to hear your stories of how you'll be impacted. I'm watching lots of stories on social media at the moment, getting farmers' views there, but I'd love to hear from you direct. And also whether you think anything can be done to change the situation. I know the NFU are planning a mass lobbying effort on the 19th of November in London, but do you think that will have an impact? We will see. Time will tell. In the meantime, please look after yourselves. Get some advice. This is absolutely key. Don't rely on all the information you're hearing around. This is just for general information. It's not specific at all. There's certainly, this podcast, for example, definitely doesn't constitute advice. But yeah, get some professional advice, depending on, which is based completely on your situation. Make a plan from that. And most importantly, keep resilient. Also, just a general shout out from me and a request that if you're a farmer and you'd like to come on the podcast to tell your story, not necessarily about APR and the budget, but just generally, if you'd like to come on, please get in touch with me. You can contact me at ben@ruralpodmedia.co.uk, send me an email, or visit the website ruralpodmedia.co.uk, and you can find all my details there. Before we go, however, let's turn to something positive, that on the 22nd and 23rd of November, there is a new event happening at the Bath and West Showground in Somerset. It's called Land Alive, and it's focused on regenerative farming. There is a competition alongside this, which is what we're going to turn to now. There is an exciting prize up for grabs, which you might be interested in, which has been launched by the Royal Bath and West Society in connection with Land Alive. And I recently caught up with Carol Paris, CEO of the Royal Bath and West Society, and Tamara Giltzoff, who is one of the Land Alive event organisers, to learn more. So, Land Alive, if you've been listening to the last few episodes, listeners, you will be aware of this fantastic event that is coming up. But Land Alive is a new 2-day event that will make the case for transition to a more localised regenerative farming and food system. And it is set to take place at the Royal Bath and West Showground in Somerset on the 22nd and 23rd of November. I, for one, am very much looking forward to it. And the Royal Bath and West Society, which runs the showground, has also announced a competition for 2 bursaries for the Routes to Regeneration training course, each worth £2,500. And to tell us about this, I am joined by Carol Paris, who is CEO of the Royal Bath and West Society, and Tamara Giltzoff, who is one of the Land Alive event organisers. Tamara, let's go over to you first. Tell us a little bit more about Land Alive and make the case for why people should go along.
Thank you, Ben. It's great to be talking to you on your podcast. Land Alive is a fledgling regenerative food and farming event happening at the Bath and West in partnership with the Bath and West on the 22nd to the 23rd of November, so very soon. We are championing regenerative food and farming in the Southwest, so we see ourselves very much as a sort of place-based event for the Southwest and beyond the Southwest. We have an incredible lineup of national speakers, actually, or national leaders in agriculture, and more broadly within the food system. Yeah, so it's 2 days. The first day is a little bit more farmer focused or farming focused. And the second day is more food systems, community food. We also have a piece on integrating fibre with food production as well on the second day.
And Carol, over to you. Why did the Royal and Bath and West Society want to get involved in this? Why were you interested in supporting Land Alive?
Well, the Bath and West Society is the oldest agricultural society in the UK. We were set up in 1777 by a chap who came to the West Country from Norfolk, and he was absolutely horrified at the standards that the local populations lived in because the rural economy was poor. their agricultural practices were poor, their livestock handling was poor. So he set up the society to try to educate in agriculture, and that's what we've been doing ever since. And I don't think there's ever been a more pertinent time for us to be doing that, because, with the climate emergency that we have, the movement towards regenerative farming is absolutely crucial. And we're hoping to sort of help our farming communities and our rural communities to evolve and respond to the sort of increasing impacts of climate change, as well as the sort of the threat to nature loss for agriculture. So yes, it absolutely meets our charitable objectives.
Yeah. And Tamara, as Carol has outlined there, I mean, the Bath of West, of course, has this incredible deep heritage to it. And Land Alive, I think, can be set against that as being this new, fresh event. So why is that relationship with the Bath and West Society so important for the event?
Yes, Bath and West has a long and established history of supporting farmers in the Southwest region. And as such, and it's been around for so long, that it has an incredible community of farmers and more broadly across the agriculture sector. And we felt it was really important to embed this relatively new practice of regenerative agriculture and regenerative food systems within an established institution and existing network within the Southwest. Bath and West's mandate is really to support farmers to evolve their practices and to move forward. And so we really felt that there was strong strategic alignment. And importantly, we see this as a long-term endeavour. We're really committed to the relationship with the Bath and West for long-term, with the Land Alive event itself, and also with ongoing events throughout the year where we will be creating spaces to convene and bring together the farming community around these emerging areas of farming transition.
So, Carol, the idea behind Land Alive, that there is this event, but it's meant to be something bigger as well. And the ideas behind it sort of culminate all this together. So how does the Bath and West Society see its relationship with the Land Alive event?
Well, we see it very much as a strategic partnership with Land Alive, as a very important step towards the support that we can provide to the agriculture and food sectors in the Southwest and beyond. And we really want to support our farming community and our membership in the Southwest during this sort of transition period of farming system and policy change. Regenerative agriculture is a movement happening in food and farming, and a transition happening with our farming system, which is clearly not going to go away. And it offers approaches to farming that prioritise outcomes for climate and nature, and ultimately that lead to food resilience in the longer term. And our way of working with that community is very much with a start point of Land Alive. And the people involved in Land Alive are hugely knowledgeable about regenerative farming and agriculture. And we would really want to be able to share that information with our membership and our community.
Yeah. I have to say, I mean, it is a great team. I've had the great pleasure of working alongside a few of those involved in organising this, and it's been incredible to see it behind the scenes. And I'm just very excited about what this event could be and what it can achieve. Yes, for this event, but also for the long term.
Yes, absolutely.
As well as supporting the conference, the Bath and West Society is introducing a competition for 2 bursaries for the Routes to Regeneration training course. Can you tell us more about this, please?
Yes, so we're absolutely delighted to be launching this competition as part of Land Alive. It's actually a fund that was donated to us from the Worshipful Company of Grocers via our honorary show director, Rupert Uloth, who has a very, very long-standing family history with the Bath and West. And we saw this as an ideal way to use that fund to really help some people to get to understand more about regenerative farming. The Roots to Regenerative program is quite incredible, and it's an ideal way for people to get involved, to go on a 2-year journey of learning, and then to see how they can implement that back on their own farms and within their own lives. So it's just perfect for us, and we're really very excited about it.
Hmm. And Tamara, I mean, I spoke to Claire Hill, who's one of the trainers actually at Groundswell this year. She was back on the podcast back in June. But can you tell us more about the training itself, about Roots to Regeneration?
Yes, as Carol said, it's a 2-year experiential learning program, predominantly designed to support farmers who are wanting to begin the journey of transition of their farm to a farming system that prioritizes climate and nature outcomes. It's very hands-on, and it also has attracted others working within agriculture. So as well as farmers, farm advisors like vets and agronomists, it's relevant to, as well as key actors working in the food system who are a key part of that transition as well. It is led by Caroline Grinrod and Claire Hill, who you've mentioned. They make a very interesting combination of big systems thinker with Caroline. She has a very long history of working with regenerative agriculture practices, so deep experience, deep technical experience, as well as understanding the bigger system that we're trying to shift. And Claire Hill, very hands-on, practical, has a demonstration farm in Shropshire. And so it really is a combination of technical experience and learning about the soil, plant and animal systems, as well as rooting it in a bigger system in the context of why we're shifting farming practices.
Right. And Carol, do you have to be going to the event to apply for this? And how do farmers take part?
No, you don't have to be at the event, but the good thing is that both Caroline and Claire will be at the event. So for people that want to find out more about how they can apply, or more about the course and more about this sort of in-depth information, that's an ideal time for them to do that. So although you don't have to be at the event, and we will take applications outside the event, we want to launch it there because I think it's one of those things that it enables people to ask the questions. What's the time commitment? How will it stimulate innovation in the sort of farm business models? So I think it's very beneficial if you are at the event, but it isn't essential. But you will miss out if you're not there.
Exactly. Speaking of which, Tamara, are there tickets still available?
There are definitely tickets still available. Yes, they are selling fast as we reach the event's deadline, but we are still open. And we really encourage farmers, particularly, who I know it's often really difficult to take time out of your day on farm, but we see this as an opportunity to build new relationships, learn new things, challenge your way of thinking, and also have some fun. So there'll be a really fun event in the evening on Friday, and everybody is welcome to that, whether they've come to the day event or not.
So I should say that this competition isn't actually officially launching until Land Alive itself, which, listeners, is yet another reason why you should come to Land Alive. But if it's of interest, then there is something to do to register your interest, as it were. Tamara, what should listeners do?
Yes, they should go to the link in the show notes, which will take you to the Roots to Regeneration page. Scroll down, book a free consultation with Claire Hill, one of the co-founders of the program. She will qualify you into the program or not if she doesn't feel that you fit. And she will also then direct you to an application form to apply for one of these bursaries. You will need to be in the Southwest to qualify for one of the bursaries. We officially launched on the 22nd of November, and we will run the competition till the end of the year. And
if that has piques your interest, listeners, I would put the link to Land Alive in the show notes, but you can visit landalive.co.uk. I will be there. I cannot wait. And I hope that you can join us there. That is it for this week on Meet the Farmers. I will be back with you next week for another episode. But for now, I'm Ben Eagle. This has been Meet the Farmers, and have a great week ahead. I'll see you next week. Meet the Farmers is brought to you by RuralPod Media, the only podcast production agency to specialise in the rural sector. We're on a mission to make rural stories mainstream and help businesses, organisations and communities like you tell your story through podcasting. Podcasting is a fantastic way of connecting with your audience, whoever that might be, getting your message out there and networking with leaders in your niche. RuralPod Media can help you by launching your new podcast or helping you with the technical side. We also provide podcast training and an audit service if you already have a podcast, you're not sure where to take it to next. For more information or to book a call, visit ruralpodmedia.co.uk. That's ruralpodmedia.co.uk.